Welcome, everybody. We're back with another candidate episode. My name is Eric LaMontagne. I'm Executive Director at Campaign for Vermont, and today I'm hosting Vote for Vermont. I'm sure you've heard me say this before. I know a lot of you like seeing Pat on this. She's not able to join for this remote today, but she is out there on a lot of the other videos. I encourage you to check out the videos on our playlist. We've recorded, 35 or 40 different candidate interviews this year, and our priority with doing these is to make sure that candidates have a platform to get their message out, regardless of what party they're affiliated with. We have anybody from any party is welcome to come on and give their candidate pitch here. We just want to make sure that you, Vermonters, have a chance to learn about the folks who want to represent you. So with that said, let's get rolling. Today, I'm joined by Representative Mike Yantachka. Let me say that again. Mike Yantachka, there we go. Mike is the representative for the Charlotte-Heinsberg area. That's Chittenden District 4-1. He sits on the House Energy and Technology Committee. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to be here.
Well, let's start this right off then. Give the mic, the virtual mic, over to you, and have you introduce yourself to folks.
Okay. Well, like you said, I'm Mike Yantachka. I'm the state representative for Charlotte and the small southwest corner of Heinsberg. And so I've been in the House for 10 years. I'm running for my 6th term. I was on the House Natural Resources and Energy Committee for the first 6 years. And then when that committee was disbanded, I guess, and the natural resources part went to Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife, and the energy part went to Energy and Technology. So the Energy and Technology Committee deals not only with energy, but also with telecommunications and the IT infrastructure of the state. So we have the policy oversight for those three sectors of the state.
Great, and that's probably a good transition. Man, I'm struggling with words today, Mike. I don't know what's going on.
It's okay.
That's a good transition then. So the next question is, can you give folks an idea about what some of your key priorities are as representative?
Yeah, that's interesting because, as you know, our session this year was disrupted by the coronavirus, and it actually changed some of the priorities we had because right away we had to deal with the pandemic. So I think the highest priority is to restore Vermont's economy in the wake of the coronavirus. And we need to continue assisting Vermonters who've lost their jobs any way we can with the help from the federal government. And, we need to encourage Vermonters to take advantage of a vaccine when it becomes available. And we need to increase opportunities for Vermont businesses and individuals with high-speed broadband because that's the way people are working now as we're doing right now. Second priority I would have is to continue my energy work, reducing the dependence on fossil fuels for heating and transportation. Transportation is the biggest contributor to our greenhouse gas emissions, and heating is the second biggest contributor. We've done a really good job with reducing our greenhouse gas emissions from electricity, and the key to reducing the others is to transition from fossil fuels to electrical energy in the areas of heating and transportation. So we want to increase weatherization assistance for Vermont homeowners because that'll help them reduce the amount of fuel oil and natural gas, wood heat, whatever that they're using right now to heat their homes, and transition it to both electricity and wood heat, highly efficient wood heat. We also want to provide incentives for land, and we do have incentives, but we need to increase them for residences. But we also want to be able to provide some incentives for landlords to increase the energy efficiency of the apartments that they're renting out. Right now, renters pay for their heat and electricity. And the landlords themselves who own the buildings don't have really an incentive to upgrade the buildings so that they're energy efficient. So we need to help them do that. And I was on the Energy Action Network 2020 Summit today, and we talked about these things and how we might get them done. In the area of transportation, we need to be able to provide incentives for people to transition to electrical energy for transportation too. And that would be electric vehicle and hybrid vehicle incentives that increase the gas mileage for their vehicles. Vermonters drive a lot, and they need to get from one place to another, and our population is spread out in rural areas, so there's a lot of driving to do. And electric vehicles can be not only energy efficient, but a lot cheaper to run and to maintain. So by helping low and moderate income Vermonters get into electric vehicles and plug-in electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles, it'll help them save on their transportation costs. And finally, the other big thing that's happened this year is the focus on racial justice and equality. So we aren't free from racism here in Vermont. We've seen that the Black Lives Matter movement has brought out some of the worst traits in people who feel that, I don't know what they feel, but they certainly have some antipathy toward people of color. And so we have to do something about that. We need to recognize there's systemic racism, the fact that our society just basically has made it more equitable for white folks to do well in this economy than it does for people of color. And in order to counter that, we have to be anti-racist. We have to take effects to it, to call out racism when we see it, to look at how our society has these built-in disadvantages for people of color and try to correct those. So we have to hold government at all levels responsible for fair and just treatment. So those are the three areas that I want to concentrate on: restoring Vermont's economy, reducing dependence on fossil fuels, and fostering racial justice and equity.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you have a good plan. So you mentioned earlier you're in year 10 of your service. Run us through some of the things that you're most proud of, some of the accomplishments or the things you've been involved with that you really feel set you apart and that you're really proud to have been a part of.
Well, as I said, I was on the House Natural Resources and Energy Committee for the first 6 years. And during that time, under the leadership of Tony, I'm blanking on his last name, the chair of the Energy Committee, I'm sorry, Tony, if I can't remember your name.
Really, I sent you over some of my struggle.
It's one of those senior moments, I think. But anyway, so what I'm proudest of is working with Tony to create a renewable energy standard for Vermont, where we actually set goals, achievable goals, for transitioning electric energy from being based on fossil fuels to being based on wind and solar. And we did a great job with that. We created a renewable energy standard that, as it stands now, will get us to 75% renewable energy by 2032. We are going to, and interestingly, Green Mountain Power said that they'll be at 100% renewable energy by 2030. And Burlington Electric Department and Washington Electric Co-op are already 100% renewable. So we've made great achievements in terms of our electrical energy, and that's one thing I'm proud of. Another thing I'm proud of is that I have been working for Vermonters to help them become more economically sufficient, okay, and to make Vermont affordable. I've supported raising the minimum wage. I've supported things like paid family leave, providing paid days off, paid sick days for Vermont families. And these are the kind of programs that I will continue to support.
Excellent, thank you. Now we know that as difficult as it is right now, we're not going to see the full economic effects of this COVID impact until next fiscal year. And when you take those impacts on top of some of these other liabilities that the state has, such as our pension liabilities and healthcare liabilities, the amount of money that we are required by the feds to pay that to achieve our water quality goals, some of these education liabilities that we have. When you put it all together, it's really, it's kind of a scary place to be in. Do you have any plans or any ideas of how to address some of these pending current economic threats?
That's a good question. We've been I'm not on any of the money committees, so, and actually I'm glad of that. They do an awful lot of work and they do a really good job. I do, being on the Energy and Technology Committee, I focus on those kind of things, and I really rely on the Ways and Means Committee and the Appropriations Committee to work through some of the economics that are involved here. Water quality, we've done some good work in the last couple of years in terms of getting the amount of funding, $25 million a year, that's going to be required in order to improve our water quality and meet the standards that the Environmental Protection Agency has set for Vermont. And what was the other part of the question besides water quality?
There's the $4.8 billion that we owe for state employee pensions and health insurance that we currently have no plan on figuring out how to pay for.
Yeah, well, actually we do have a plan because we have been increasing the amount that we put into the pension funds. There's a set amount that's supposed to be put in every year, and we've been trying to increase that over and above that set amount. And one of the things we've done was we said that 25% of any surplus that we have, any revenue surplus that we have above our appropriations, would go into the pension funds to help pay them down. The whole problem arose from in the 1990s when the legislature decreased the amount it was putting into the pension funds from what they should have been putting in. And the idea there, I guess, was that the stock market was roaring so well that the stock market would take care of our pension obligations. Well, as it turned out, we had a couple of recessions in between there that put us behind the curve. So we're trying to make up for that now. We can't do it all at once, and we need to do it gradually. We need to be persistent about it, and it's going to take years to do it. So,
yeah, it's a big problem, and that instance in the 90s was definitely a precipitated it when they were essentially kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, if I remember the exact structure correctly, where they were deliberately underfunding with the expectations of a certain growth the next year. And unfortunately, that just never seemed like it never happened. And meanwhile, what we were basing our projections on, those percentage points, are still, we're still estimating more than we're getting back in our returns, which is causing this perennial underfunding position problem.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
So let's move on here. So the Governor Scott just recently vetoed the Global Warming Solutions Act. What are your thoughts on that move?
Well, as you know, we overrode the veto, and we did it with a very comfortable margin of 103 votes to 107. 103 votes to 47. We needed 100 votes for it to pass, and we did better than the 100. His objections seemed to be that he wouldn't have any input, but that was wrong. He has 8 members that's going to be on that Climate Action Council. And those 8 members of his administration, if he's reelected, will provide the administration perspective on how we can accomplish our goals, our requirements. The key thing about the Global Warming Solutions Act is that it turns the goals that we set for ourselves to reduce our carbon emissions into requirements. And we can do that. We just need a plan to do it. Another objection he had was that it violates separation of powers. That is also incorrect, in my opinion. It provides legislative intent for rulemaking. Rules have to be approved by the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, and any taxes or fees still need additional legislation in order to implement. So they'll come up with a plan, and that's what's needed. As my chair, Tim Brigman, said, a vision without a plan is a hallucination. So we need the plan in order to translate this into reality. So
I hadn't heard that one before. I like that one.
yeah.
Now, a strong area of interest that the Campaign for Vermont has been working in is this idea of government ethics. So we championed the legislation that created the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee recently proposed a set of ethical guidelines with the idea that they would be adopted by statute, as Vermont currently doesn't have any sort of ethical guidelines that are more than just a suggestion, barring criminal offenses. But we really don't have anything that's more than just a suggestion. Where do you stand on ethics legislation?
Well, I'm always in favor of ethical standards. I try to live ethically in all aspects of my life, and I think I generally succeed at that. But we do have ethical standards for the legislature, both for the House and the Senate, and we have a House ethics panel and a process for handling ethics complaints. So I'm not sure what other legislation or what other areas. I mean, we are a separate branch of government from the administration. So I guess we could pass laws regulating, or rather setting ethical standards for the administration and for other state officers like the treasurer, the attorney general, the auditor of accounts, secretary of state. But I guess you have to look and see what types of ethics violations that we needed to address. And
well, for instance, there was a few years ago, there was an instance where there was somebody who was serving on a committee dealing with, I believe it was solar power, was one of the high up executives on a solar company, and the legislation being considered was adding more money to that contract. And so that ended up working itself out, but it highlighted the fact that there was actually no in statute law saying that conflicts of interest involving these large amounts of money must be avoided. So that.
Well, I would be in favor of setting a standard that says that you can't have a conflict of interest like that. As a matter of fact, even a perception of a conflict of interest, I think, is bad. So sometimes when we have a vote on the floor, I hear one legislator or another invoke, I think, Rule 75, which basically allows them to not vote on a bill because of a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest. So, yeah, I mean,
Well, that
certainly appropriate to do.
That term you use there, perceived conflict of interest, is very important as well. And it's our belief that legislation, if done properly, it's not meant to be any sort of gotcha, jam you up type of legislation, but rather an educational tool to help avoid these problems, and also to help add some confidence to the public that there is a set of standards.
Right, and we go through ethics training every biennium. So when we first, like, we're going through an election now, we'll have new legislators coming in January. And the new legislators and the old legislators are supposed to attend. I think some of them play hooky, but they're supposed to attend the next ethics briefing where they go through the entire House ethics standards and what to do if they think that there's a complaint, who they report it to, and that sort of thing. So, you know, we try to do what we're supposed to be doing. The thing is that our legislature is a citizen legislature. None of us, I think, are professional politicians, legislators. And we come from all aspects of life and businesses. We've got people that are nurses, we've got people that are lawyers, we've got people that are small business owners, and you know, you name it. The people that have that work on solar energy projects and firms and things like that. We have to be very careful about how we're perceived and how we might exert influence over areas that might influence us. That being said, we can't shirk our responsibilities to make our voice, our responsibilities to represent our constituents and vote on all bills that we possibly can. So unless there's a blatant conflict of interest, I think most legislators will vote on most bills.
So we've got, about 5 more minutes here. Let's talk, touch on, you mentioned earlier your concerns with some of the racial tensions and some of the newly exposed injustices that are happening in Vermont. Let's, can you just expand on your thoughts on that a little bit, please?
Sure. So first of all, it's important to understand that Black Lives Matter doesn't discount the lives of any other race or ethnicity. It just calls attention to the indisputable fact that there have been way too many times when it hasn't seemed to matter, that they weren't given the same value or consideration as white lives. We've seen that with George Floyd, we've seen that with Breonna Taylor, we've seen that with Aubrey. Can't remember what his first name was. But these things seem to happen, and we've seen instances even in Burlington where it doesn't necessarily have to do with Black people, but where police officers have used force unjustifiably, and perhaps, you know, in the heat of the moment. So we have to acknowledge the fact that the social system in this country is racist at its base. It's evidenced by redlining, by inferior schools in Black neighborhoods, by toxic industrial environments bordering Black neighborhoods. And we can say that these things are primarily in other states, not Vermont, but also the attitudes and assumptions of police toward people of color in general, and by unjustified use of force by police in certain situations. So, you know, we need to be aware of that. We need to be conscious of the fact that racism exists. And, you know, I think to when Kaya Morris, a representative from Bennington, went through that period where she was being harassed by someone who really was, I would say, racist. And it took a toll on her, and it took a toll on her family, and she resigned from the legislature as a result. That should never happen. And we have to call that out. And when we see racist graffiti, swastikas, or White Lives Matter being painted over signs and things like that, that is something we need to stand up against.
All right. Let's wrap this up here by having you let's hear your elevator's pitch here. Why you think you're the best candidate to continue this position, and what it is that you have to offer folks.
Well, let me first point out that I don't have an opponent, and I haven't had an opponent in the last 2 elections either. So I hope that that's because I'm representing my community well. I have a deep dedication to not only serving and representing my community, but also to make policy decisions based on good information and careful analysis of that information. I also believe that communications is a two-way street. I write an article every week for our local papers when we're in session. We have 2 papers that serve Charlotte. One is called the Charlotte News, the other one is called the Citizen. Charlotte News publishes every other week, and the Citizen publishes weekly. So I alternate. I write an article for the Charlotte News for every edition, and on the alternate weeks when they aren't publishing, I write an article for the Citizen. And I try to keep people informed on what's going on in the State House and in Montpelier and the way it affects them. And I also value the input that I get from my constituents. I enjoy hearing their perspectives on issues, and I respond to their emails, I respond to their phone calls, and I meet with a number of groups in my community to participate.
Excellent. And so if folks want to find out more about you, where do they go?
They could go to my website, www.mikeyantachka.com. And there they'll find all the articles that I write for the papers, as well as some other things that I put in there occasionally on particular subjects. So.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you for everybody who tuned in to watch this. Please, again, check out our playlist, our YouTube playlist, for all of the candidate videos. And actually, while you're there, check out the whole channel. We have some really interesting shows on there about the Cog Railway, and we did one on the USS Vermont, we did one on beer. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff on there. So again, thank you for tuning in, and keep listening beyond the sound bites.
And I'd like to say thank you to ORCA and to you, Eric, for hosting me. And I also want to acknowledge that ORCA has been in our committee, taking our committee proceedings several times. So thank you.
Thank you.